Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Heather Natoli, and we're going to talk about a way to release trauma from your body that is really not heard of that much, I don't think. So it's really interesting and it's really kind of cool. So I'm excited to talk about this. So Heather, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is my biggest passion. I love talking about fascia. So I'm Heather Natoli and I run the Fascia Clinic out of New Jersey. I also do some online classes and I teach about body patterns and how we hold and store our stories, our trauma physically in our bodies, and what we can do to repattern that and continue moving things through, literally.
And yeah, and that's awesome because we do store everything in our bodies. But, before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah. So I have actually been a homeopath for the past 12 years. So I've been practicing in holistic medicine, holistic practitioning, right? And through all of that, through experiencing the life in a bit of a different lens than our modern take on healing and growing, I realized how much people were storing in their tissues. And so through my own journey of releasing past experiences of childhood trauma, I was able to find practitioners who were able to feel the pattern in my body and my legs, right? In like these random exterior spaces, and know exactly the emotion that I was feeling, or, the events that were held, and how it was affecting me still in this world today. So I was, immediately just drawn into, tell me more. I need to learn this. Right. How do we bring this into a practice that, is all about healing and growing?
Wow. So, that's kind of cool. It makes me think kind of like with massage therapists where they can hit a spot on your body and they can say, oh, you're holding anger here. Yeah. And you're just kind of like, how do you know that? And they just know. It's so cool, but eerie at the same time.
Yeah, it's incredible. There's so much we don't know about these bodies.
Absolutely. We're learning more and more every day. And, a lot of this is, people are like, oh, that's just woo woo. The only way you can heal from trauma is talk therapy and just, whatever. And there's so many different ways to heal from trauma, from different aspects. Talk therapy is great for one aspect, but we said at the beginning, we hold our trauma in our bodies. And so you talk about the fact that we hold the trauma in our fascia. So let's start off with telling people, what is fascia?
Yeah. So fascia is incredible. And I know a lot of people think of fascia when we talk about like the front of our shin, right? We have these clear spaces of very dense fascia that if you've heard the word, that's usually what you associate it with. But fascia is actually a word that now encompasses the whole covering over your muscles. It weaves its way down through into beneath your muscles, around your bones. It's like this whole netted bodysuit that covers every structure in your body and kind of weaves its net to hold you in like a bodysuit. And it's actually a sensory organ, which is one of the most exciting parts of our newest discoveries with fascia.
So is it, like I'm thinking of, and I'm sorry to all the vegans out there, but I'm thinking of like when you skin a deer or skin an animal, and you see the red muscle, but then there's like this white sinewy stuff that you have to peel away. Is that the fascia?
Yes. And a little gentler way for our vegan friends to think about fascia is if we think of an orange, right? If we peel that orange and we see that white coating all over it, and then you see how in each wedge of the orange, it like weaves its way through the entire wedge, right? That's how fascia works. It weaves its way all through every muscle, deep into your body until it has like that core, right? Just like in the middle of your orange.
That's a much better example than mine.
It's just a little bit easier to digest.
Right? So you mentioned that the fascia is a sensory organ. How is that? How does that work?
Yeah. So I think that is like a really pivotal fact about fascia that brings us back to trauma and what we store in our body, because fascia is actually, it has all of those sensory receptors laying directly in it. So pain receptors, vibration receptors, right? All of these different touch and feeling receptors, but it also picks up on the way like the things that are happening around us, right? So emotions, we can feel the energy around us and how it shifts, right? If somebody comes in angry, we can feel that they're angry before we even look at their face.
Right.
And it's our fascia that's picking up on those tones. And then it tells our nervous system how to react with our body posture. So it tells our nervous system how to pull our muscles into a position to guard.
So it's kind of in line with our like our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm learning all these big words. It's so great.
Yeah.
I feel so smart.
I love it.
So we store our trauma in our fascia. Don't we store it in our cells too?
Yeah. So I believe that it's really storing, right? Fascia is it just makes up so much of our body, right? When we think of like, oh, we're these water dense systems, we have so much water in our body, it lays in the fascia, right? Our fascia is that water dense matrix. So that is most of us, it's most of our cells are fascial cells, right? And the other stuff that lays in the fascia, like our lymph system and the nervous system, right? And our cardiovascular system and all of those organs and muscles that are kind of just listening and waiting for their cues of when to do their mechanical operations. The fascia seems to be a little bit more intelligent, where it's able to kind of take in information and say, hey, this is what we have to do next. Hey, this is how we have to respond, right? And it's protecting us. So it really is attached to that fight or flight, right? That sympathetic nervous system. It's really tapped in there and tells our body when to initiate.
Okay. So how do we go about releasing the trauma from there?
Yeah. So releasing fascia, we've heard a lot about, right? Fascia blasters. A lot of people are using foam rollers right now. Right. You can go in for myofascial release. That's a big one with massage therapists.
Okay.
I like to take a totally different approach on fascia and releasing fascia, because I approach all healing with just a sensitivity to trauma and trying not to re-traumatize, like you were saying with talk therapy, right? We're multifaceted people, so we need to be addressing all these different dimensions of ourselves. But with talk therapy, we try not to re-traumatize ourselves as we're processing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the same respect, when we're working our body and telling our fascia that it's okay to release, if we go in really strongly and with grinding and scraping, we run the risk of re-traumatizing that fascial system, right? That gentle sensory organ. And in turn, then later having this stronger guarding come up, which is often why after you have something like a deep tissue massage, you might feel better for a little while and then actually feel a lot worse.
Yeah. They always say, make sure you really hydrate after a deep tissue massage, and you may feel fluish for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And that's because that's all that crap leaving your body, right?
Yeah. And, there's all these elements to it. Like when you kick up stuff in your body, you want to make sure that you're able to process it properly, that you're eliminating things properly, right? That it's able to actually come up and move through. So we want to make sure that all of those, facets of ourselves are operating properly before we go digging in there. So I actually recommend like gentle work, right? Doing gentle, targeted massage, right? Energy work is really great if you're into that kind of thing to begin with, and just start slowly. Another thing I like to do is, even just for ourselves, if you can just imagine this, just lay your hands on your chest, right below your collarbone, one hand over the other. And if you just anchor down on your skin on that chest, right, you're actually anchoring down on the fascial system beneath that skin, and you can feel a gentle pulling into your neck and up into your head just by doing that, right? And that is a really great way to simply remind your fascia, right? That's the fascia that weaves into your vagus nerve and all of these really big sympathetic players. And anchoring that and just holding it and breathing into it can be a really good start to before you do any big work of fascia, right? To just remind your body like, hey, we're safe. We're ready to step into this. We're ready to start releasing.
Yeah. Now, like I've used the foam rollers and those hurt like hell.
Yeah.
You get the, in some spots it's like, oh, that feels so good. And then you hit that spot and you're like, oh my God, that hurt.
Yeah.
And you don't want to touch it, but it,
Yeah.
So I like, maybe a more gentler approach. That's not quite so painful.
Right.
But it tells you that there's a lot of stuff stored right there.
Right. You can feel it. You can but even going gently, if you were to use those same tools and just do a gentle glide over, I promise you will still find the areas that you're like, whoa, something's hanging out there, right? So you don't have to press very hard, and just going really gently and finding those spots and just holding it, right? Like a steady holding will allow it to start releasing, and releasing at a rate that it's not going to re-traumatize. It's not going to set you off where you're like, holy cow, what am I doing?
Now, do you find like there's different maybe traumas or emotions stored in different parts? So for example, I'll use myself for example. When I do foam rolling, the most painful areas for me are on my hips. The bursas are really swollen there.
Yeah.
So, does that mean that I'm holding a certain emotion right there or a certain trauma right there? Or is it that's just kind of where it's collected?
Some people actually hold most of their stress in that area, especially women tend to hold their stress around their hips, right? A lot of people who have been in situations like, I don't really know your story, but a lot of people who have been through sexual or feeling out of control in their history tend to clench their glutes and their inner thighs. That can lead to fascial adhesions or things getting really tight in those areas.
That would make sense. I do have a history of rape and sexual abuse, so that would make sense there.
Yeah. So that's very much, where you typically find those things. But then there's also in the chest, right? Often we complain and have pain in our back where we're like, I need to go get a massage. My back hurts, my shoulders, my neck, right?
Yeah.
That's typically coming from the chest. So when we go into a stress pattern, when our body's feeling overwhelmed, we naturally pull our shoulders forward and pull our head forward to protect our throat, to protect, our visceral organs and our heart space. And that starts getting really tight. And what we're actually feeling the pain in is the overstretched muscles that are then prone to spasming. So it's really good to, instead of, pull your shoulders back and chest out, instead of doing that, is to just gently massage your chest while you're laying in bed at night, right? Things that you could do yourself, or doing that anchoring and just breathing into it to allow that chest space to keep opening up, and remembering that we're here, like we can move through this, right?
Yeah. Okay. What part does, I know diet, nutrition, all that plays a huge part in, our overall health and everything, but specifically with the fascia, what kind of part does it play with that?
Yeah. Fascia is incredibly important in moving nutrients through our body. So we had thought that all of our nutrients move through our cardiovascular system, right? But some of them, especially like electrolytes and even some of the cells and neurotransmitters and hormones that we need, like if we need histamine, or we need, something to get to another part of our body to create inflammation or whatever that is, it actually moves through the fascial system because it moves really quickly through that area. So keeping your fascia hydrated is really important. So making sure that you're drinking a lot of water, but not only, plain water. We need electrolytes. We need electrolyte water for our fascia to work well. And we also need to be moving mechanically that water that we drink into our cells. So after you drink a little bit of water, or your electrolyte water, you should be doing gentle movement, right? Gently
walking, stretching.
Go for a walk. The best thing for your fascia is to be jumping.
Okay.
And jumping on a hard surface. So doing jumping jacks, jump roping, right? As much bounce as you can get into your day to get it started. It's really great. Really
rebounding.
Yeah.
I know rebounding is really good, where you get the mini trampoline that's pretty tight and you bounce on that.
Yeah. And they're fun.
Yeah, they are. My knees don't think so, but
Well, start small. Start really small.
Exactly. Well, Heather, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. I love learning about new modalities and new things about our bodies in relation to trauma. So this has been really cool.
Oh, yes, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
How can our listeners find you?
So you can find me at thefasciaclinic.org. And you can find me on Facebook under my group, Purposeful Self-Healers.
Awesome. And listeners, I'll have all that information in the show notes. Just head over to releasingtraumapodcast.com, pull up Heather's show, and all her contact information will be there. So Heather, thank you so much again for coming on the show. This has been wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
And listeners, thank you as always for tuning in, and we'll talk to you in the next show.